Good afternoon, honorable audience, ladies and gentlemen. Um, this is the afternoon sessions. We are talking about how to advance K-MOOC. Before introduce the honorable presenters and discussant, let me just two sentences talking about why K-MOOC and what's K-MOOC. K-MOOC is not MOOC in Korea. K-MOOC has own unique characteristics and mechanism, and it will be presented by Professor Lim, who is in Ulsan National Institute of Science and Technology. And second presenters is Johanness Heinlein, Vice President of edX. And we have two discussants, Taeeog Lee, the Director of Center for Excellence in Learning and Teacher, KAIST. And the last discussant is Timothy O'Shea, the President of University of Edinburgh. Both two presenters talking about MOOC, flipped learning, and K-MOOC by Professor Lim. And Johanness will present reinventing education, and he will give us some insight how to activate the MOOC in Korea. So why don't we big clap for presenters and discussant. Okay, Professor Lim, both of you have 20 minutes for presentation and discussant 7 minutes for discussion. And then I will have each presenters and discussant questions. And we have two questions from the floor. So if you have questions, just let somebody knows. Start.
Well, first of all, we know that our society itself has been changing from the industrial society to knowledge-based society. That's why now everyone talks about in this nation creativity and creative economics, something like this. Well, in the earlier days, mainly we focused on efficiency through mass production. But nowadays, everyone talks about personalized, individualized, mass customization. So education is for the society, how to train our workers, students, to be fit in this new environmental change. Well, now we know that thanks to the Hangyeong Global HR Forum like this, everybody talks about now we have to change our education model to enhance our students' creative talent, like World Bank Jinhyouk president, and also even President Park said that we need a new education model to train our students for the 21st century. Well, everyone knows this. Everyone talk about this, just memorizing and to prepare exams. That's not good for this new economic situation that we've been trying to develop. So now let me go back to a bit this article written by MIT president. He said that now, all over the world, not just in Korea, in the United States, students are claiming that we cannot afford our education because tuition is so high. But at the same time, colleges, universities also claiming that we cannot afford educating our students, simply because MIT, you know, the MIT is highly endowed, a lot of resources to teach their students. But he claims this: we pay 3 times than what student pays to us. So simply, this kind of education model is unsustainable. Unsustainable. Everyone understand what does this mean. We have to change this. Well, recently, I'll share the survey based on from the American university's president. Everyone knows that we have to change out our education model. That's what you see here. How? Well, many of them say that we need some drastic, some transformation called disruptive innovation should be done. Not just changing a bit, but we have to change it totally in different manner. Then who's going to do this? Well, here, based on this survey, we know that basically those involved in the education should be done, like faculty and president should lead such innovation. But ironically, they are very slow. That's why politicians and media are pushing universities to change, to be changed. That's what you see exactly. World Bank president talking about changes in education. Even President Park talks about changes in education rather than university presidents. So in summary, we know that universities have been facing two challenges: cost down, cutting cost, yet improving quality. How to provide creative education while cutting cost, rather than keep on asking government to put more money. So in short, we know that we try to handle this issue like this. This is traditional approach. But we know that there's no solution here. So we need some drastic or disruptive innovation like this, while improving quality yet cutting cost. That's the only way to handle this, not just asking government to put more money or asking students to pay more tuition. Well, Nature, one of the top engineering journals recently said that universities, many universities all over the world are going through educational experiments. What solution do we need? How to transform our education system to train our students to have more creative talent, yet cutting cost? There are two promising alternatives coming out recently: MOOC and platform. Well, many of them in Korea are not quite familiar with these terms, but now it becomes very everybody's words, like MOOC and platform. These are two promising, not quite models, but experiments, trials. Well, University of Pennsylvania, UPenn did its study based on their experience. It said that they thought that MOOC would revolutionize educational, higher education. But in reality, they found that most of them have already higher education degrees, not starters. At the same time, very low passing rate, like 4%. It sounds like a failure. It's not keeping up its promise. So many people jumped in and they say that, well, MOOC is dead. MOOC doesn't work, just after trying 1 year. But another survey done by MIT came out with different perspective. It said that even though 4% out of 100 students means still a lot of students out there, not just 4%. But when you see numbers, big numbers out there. Secondly, students not go through from the beginning to the end, unlike the traditional student, but they move around. It means modularity. Why should you push students from coming all the way from the beginning to the end? Let them allow to pick and choose where they wanted to take. And thirdly, continuing education. In other words, 67% already have higher education, but they want to change something or they want to keep up their knowledge. Allow them to take MOOC rather than go back to colleges. So in summary, we know that this intimidation happened. This intimidation means skipping intermediaries. In this case, in education, professors provide courses to students, but they have to go through intermediary, in this case, college or university. So thanks to MOOC, now students can take course directly from a professor without going through an intermediate, without going to Harvard, without getting admitted to Harvard. You can take Harvard course, in other words. That's why Professor Krutension said that in 15 years, half of the American university will disappear thanks to this intimidation. Very bold prediction. Well, Coursera recently announced that it'll offer special certificates to students who pass multiple MOOCs, just like a specialization or major in a college. So it's directly competing with the universities. Without going through university, students can take a major or specialty, something like this. Well, recently you read this, today you read this news from the newspaper, said that Samsung tried to come up with new way of selecting their people. 직군별 직무 역량 평가. In other words, in English, it means competence-based selection. In other words, competence-based learning can be possible. Competency over degree, rather than getting degree from a college. What do you know? Prove. So MOOC will help us to move to degree-based learning, from degree-based learning to competence-based learning. Well, you can make your own degree. That's what President Obama highly acknowledged, that like the university, Southern New Hampshire University, based on competence-based learning. They've been experimenting new idea like this. And another issue, in addition to MOOC, is the flipped learning. Flipped classroom, according to this Horizon report, will be already in the mainstream. According to last year's survey, it said that 50% of American college professors have said that we've been implementing flipped learning. So 50% means half of them. So it's already in mainstream, though in Korea, many of them say, what is flipped learning? Well, thanks to KBS and SBS, something like this, now they've been talking about 거꾸로 학습 or 뒤집힌 학습, flipped learning, something like this. Well, I'll not go through this, but now what the relationship between MOOC and flipped learning? MOOC is for open education, but it has also connection with flipped learning like this. MOOC itself is, again, open or free education you can think of, but MOOC has contents, good quality contents there, then it can be used for internal purpose, in other words, for higher education. So there's some big linkage. Let me share one experiment done by San Jose University. They tried two different things with MOOC, with flipped learning. They found that MOOC was a failure, but flipped learning improved the education quality almost twice. Well, this is a small example, so we cannot generalize based on this, but still it shows us that flipped learning based on the MOOC contents will help us to handle our problem. Now, MOOC by nation. So far, we know that MOOC providers are all in the United States, but now some nations like France, China, Saudi Arabia try to come up with its own MOOC version. So many people think that, what about Korea? According to this chart, you saw that still Korea is one of the 3 nations who are sending students to the United States: India, China, Korea. But according to this chart, top 16 nations where students are coming from to take MOOCs, Korea is not there, ironically. The largest factor behind this is that, I think, language barrier. So that tells us another reason why we have to develop our own MOOC. Of course, we can think of our own contents. Now, Korean, I try to wrap up my presentation. So now we can think of open education and closed education. Closed education means you have to go through an intermediate, like you have to admit it to a university or college. Open university means anytime, anywhere, anybody. Well, MIT started in year 2002, called OCW, Open Courseware. Open up all their teaching contents to the world. Anybody can use their content. It's a very innovative idea. Nobody thought, how come you can share intellectual property in this way? But MIT did it. Yes, it helped somehow moving toward open education, but not that much for closed education. In other words, directly affecting the traditional education. And second part, now coming MOOC. Well, OCW itself is just providing content. Now MOOC, that's a course management involved in there. But MOOC itself is mainly for open education. Now, flipped learning is for closed education. What the link is among those three? When you have a MOOC platform, then depending on the situation, you may provide it as a MOOC, in other words, for open education purpose, or for closed education in the form of flipped learning. So that's why we need some Korean version of MOOC platform. Now, Korean government actually have decided to go with Korean MOOC platform. Well, NILE, 국가평생교육진흥원, is in charge of this national task. So they've been drawing the Korean version of the K-MOOC. Well, in this case, you know that in the United States, private sectors are coming up with new ideas and trying, and through the market mechanism, they've been competing, and finally, the successful case will survive or thriving. But in our case, in Korea, by having Korean government, sometimes it's more efficient to come up with, or our market system doesn't work for this kind of innovative work. So by having Korean government to get involved in this task is that we can think of all kind of education to cover all kind of educations, not just higher. In most cases, MOOC providers, edX, Coursera is focusing on higher education. But what about K-12? And what about other non-informal trainings or some continuing education part? So all education can be affected by this. So when we design Korean MOOC platform, we've been thinking of all possible different types of educations to be covered with this. Then we'll have a national standardized platform to support, again, from K-12, higher education, and corporate training purpose, or any kind of education can be done in this way. So by having a standardized platform like this is very key in that sense. Then it'll change the whole education system that we've been seeing. And based on this, then we can talk about how to reduce or at least contain education cost. At the same time, how we can train our students to be more creative than to compete in the 21st century. So I'm very excited. Then finally, Korean government decided to go this way. And you know that when we have very strong IT infrastructure in this nation. Once we decide, I think that we will move very fast in this new area. And also, many people think that education itself is a supporting function. But when we see education transformed to IT-intensive model like this, itself will be a new growth engine. Everyone talks about new growth engine in this nation. It will be another new industrial sector for national growth. And we've been sharing this experience certainly with other nations. And also, thanks to our, again, electronic industry like Samsung Electronics, we have very smart devices. We can take advantage of this to really transform our educational model. So I think that there's some strong potential for Korea to develop our own version and then use this for to totally transform our educational systems to move forward, 21st century. Thank you. That's for my presentation.
Thank you so much, and it's an honor and pleasure to be here today and to speak a little bit about what we call reimagine education. And what I'd like to do over the last 10, 15 minutes, I'll give more time for questions because I think in the end that's really important that we have a discussion with you, the audience, and with my fellow presenters, is really talk about why now? Why are MOOCs and why is technology suddenly playing such an important role in education across the globe? What is changing? So what is influencing the educational changes both within universities, within government policies, and also within corporations? And then last but not least, give a glimpse of what are perhaps some possible scenarios for the future of education. First and foremost, I'd like to start out by mentioning that why did Harvard and MIT develop and start edX? And why are we so passionate about this? And why should you be passionate about what is currently happening in the educational world and with MOOCs? And that is really to underscore that knowledge is the most important currency of the 21st century. Knowledge drives what we all do on a daily basis. It is supportive of societies, and it is those societies that invest in education that will be ultimately more successful than others. So maybe to talk a little bit about what hasn't changed in education. Education has, of course, been around for centuries, for thousands of years. But, and this is lighthearted, so don't take it too serious, but still I thought it's worthwhile to quickly talk about this. So this is a lecture in about 1300 AD in Italy, and it really doesn't look that different from a lecture today. And if we look at the specifics, you'll see that there are a lot of similarities. So if you look up in the top right corner, even in 1300 AD, people during lectures would chat with each other. They wouldn't pay attention to the professor, but they talked to each other. Some would sleep. Others would, at that time, check the internet. Well, it was a book, Facebook. And yet others, and that's perhaps for many the most important aspects of studying, that's certainly how I met my wife, they would flirt. So that's what education looked like 1,000 years ago. So what has changed, and how does the lecture look today? And this is a lecture at MIT, a picture taken last year. Now there is one fundamental change. Anybody venture a guess? What has changed? There are blackboards at the front. The professor is still standing there being an orator, but we have blackboards. Now, if that's the degree of change, that really isn't sufficient. So let's look at what hasn't changed. Students are still checking Facebook. Now they do it on a computer, on a handheld. Students are still sleeping. Students are still somewhat engaging in whatever activities. And most importantly, students are still flirting. So, you know, education really hasn't changed that much, but technology is changing what and how education is delivered today. So, before I get to how institutions are influenced, let me spend another 30 seconds or so on how society is changing. This is a picture taken in Rome, and this is in 2005. And if you look very, very carefully, this is St. Peter's Square. You can see one or two mobile phones. If you look at the bottom right, you can maybe see someone taking a picture. So this is when the Pope came out on St. Peter's Square in 2005. Now let's look at the same picture in 2013. And the reason why this is so important is to underscore how technology is changing our daily lives. Everything that we do, everything that we engage with, our working life, our private lives are influenced by technology. But education really hasn't been influenced to the extent that it will in the future. So the changes are driven by external factors. First and foremost, information is now accessible anywhere, anytime, on any device. Learners are comfortable forming virtual communities as well as real-life communities, meaning on-campus communities. And communication is as common online as it is in direct physical connections. So those are some societal changes that are occurring, and that drives us to what the new classroom might look like. So let's talk specifically now about Mooc technology, and forgive me, there are many Mooc providers, but being that I'm from edX, I will focus a little bit more on edX since I'm obviously more familiar with edX. So edX is a non-profit open source venture that was founded by Harvard and MIT about 2.5 years ago. It distinguishes itself from other technology platforms that provide MOOCs in a number of aspects. The first and foremost, we share a common goal with all MOOC providers, and that is make quality educational material accessible to everyone, ideally for free. But as an organization, we looked at how can we truly influence the future of education, not just on campus, but within societies. And we strongly believe that in order to do that, you need to invest and investigate what you do on campus, what you do in a setting, in a residential setting. So edX's mission not only is to seek to provide educational material to everyone, but to improve on-campus education. And then last but not least, we do so by engaging in deep pedagogical research. And I'll talk about that research and how it influences the future in a second. Very quickly, edX, here you see some snapshot numbers, about 3.2 million learners right now in 196 plus countries, about 6 million course enrollments, and about 100 institutions, countries, and corporations are using the open source platform. There are some examples here of how edX is applied and MOOCs are applied in general in non-university settings. On the left, you see the McKinsey Academy, you see Johnson & Johnson, Ethicon, and the World Economic Forum. All of them established platforms that are based on Mooc technology to drive engagement with their employees and to drive learning in an employee setting. Through our open source platform, edX has been very fortunate to collaborate with a lot of governments and institutions. The edX platform is used by the national governments in France, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, to name just a few. And you will see more of those engagements where governments, similar to what we heard earlier, have a vested interest in how education is delivered and how students engage with educational material. So I talked about data and why we believe that is so important. As you use online technologies, we collect a lot of data on the learners. We collect the engagement, the click-through data, how they engage with videos, how they engage with exercises. And that data we call learning analytics. It's optimized for the teaching environment of the faculty members. It's meant to be used in a blended environment, and it drives positive learning outcomes. And in the end, that is really the most important aspect of Mooc technology, or technology in the classroom. It's not to supplement or rather to get rid of teachers. It's to complement what happens in the classroom and to improve learning outcomes. Here are some other analytics that are being used in the various platforms, and more analytical data is available for partner institutions to really truly investigate how learning outcomes are being optimized for different audiences. So what is happening more and more, and we heard just before about blended learning environments. This is an example of where institutions are utilizing content from other institutions to teach new modalities and new content. So in this instance, this is Jinhyouk University in China, using content developed at Berkeley University in California and flipping the classroom, engaging in blended learning. So using the material that's been developed in one institution to enhance and to complement the learning experience in another. Again, it's not about supplementing it. Think of it, and this is not a perfect analogy, but think of it as an enhanced textbook that is being used in the classroom, a virtual simulation that is interactive, that introduces gamification into the classroom, and that then drives these positive learning outcomes. So let's talk about the future. What might the future look like? But first of all, when we think about the future, it's often a good thing to ask questions. And there are a number of questions that are critical. First of all, the question remains, if we introduce technology and if blended learning is so important and if Mooc learning is so important, what is the added value of a residential experience? Should the whole degree that one undertakes be completed in a 4-year degree program or a 5-year degree program or a 2-year degree program? Why have residential experiences? What is the right size of a module for learning? So again, is a 14, 16, 3-month semester course, is that the right module to teach content? Or do we need to think about modularization of content that is personalized and customized to the individual learner? How can communication and interaction be strengthened? And this is so important because going to a university or being engaged in lifelong learning, which really this is about, it's about lifelong learning, cradle to grave. How can we ensure that communication stays a fundamental and instrumental part of the learning experience? Because engaging with each other, not just through technology, is really critical and important. Last but not least, one of the important questions to ask is who controls and owns the data? Who defines learning pathways? So is that something that's been done by governments? Is that something that's done by private organizations? Is that something that needs to be done in collaboration between different entities? But these are very important questions to ask if one thinks about how education may evolve going forward. So here are some thoughts around what the future of education will look like. And these are thoughts, and some of them are meant to be provocative. The future of education needs to be both open, online, blended, and residential. Blended learning absolutely must be an integral part of the delivery of educational content. Secondly, research into what works is instrumental in driving successful learning outcomes. It's simply not good enough to collect all of the data and not use it to better understand how students, throughout the whole life experience of learning, learn and what drives positive outcomes. So data is your friend here. I think I've heard over the last 2 days in conversations and some of the forum discussions, a number of people talking about how suddenly there's a whole new field of data czars in universities that are responsible for collecting the data, analyzing the data, and working with their peers within organizations and the government to focus on those particular aspects of the learning experience that are truly value added. So data is really, really important. Next, and perhaps something quite fitting here for this forum, flexibility and localization is critical. I think nothing else would be worse than having just a single course from a single institution cover a single topic. Excellence happens all across the world. Sometimes the best teachers come from unexpected places. And also, because we're looking at localization and the flexibility, I strongly believe that it's very important for countries, for regions, and for corporations to have some control over their learning pathways as they're defined. It is important, in my view, that Korea does establish this and continues to establish, because you already have a fantastic educational system, its unique value proposition. Don't just copy what everybody else does. Continue to do what you're already doing well, and then add to it by augmenting it with best practices from elsewhere. Our perspective at edX is that the adaptation of an open common platform will prevent fragmentation. Think of it this way: someone needs to provide the railroad tracks. How you develop the carriage that drives on the railroad tracks doesn't really matter. It could look very different in different instances. But if we suddenly have all sorts of different railroad tracks, that would be a problem. So having an open standard, a solid foundation on which people can build, is very important. It's a risk mitigation aspect as well, and it avoids the dilution of effort. You don't have to develop for 14 different platforms, perhaps only for 3 or 4 different ones. A federated model, we believe, is critical. And a federated model means, again, that there are collaborations, that perhaps governments have a strong role in driving and influencing educational content and platforms, but that you collaborate. Don't try and do this on your own. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Try to collaborate and work together with others. One point that was raised in the previous discussion is professional education is more and more critical, as is high school education and as are curricular pathways. I'd mentioned this earlier, but it's really now important that we think of learning as a lifelong experience. Don't simply think of the learning experience as one short part of your career or of your university experience. Think of it from so kindergarten, all the way to the lifelong learner. Last but not least, financial sustainability is critical. Yes, governments might be able to fund some of these efforts, but for institutions, ultimately, there is a cost that's involved. So financial sustainability for institutions and for corporations is very, very critical. So let me close by just re-emphasizing one very important aspect. If nothing else, please just take away that one thing from my talk, and that is the changes to educational models are here to stay. Standing still simply is not an option. Even if you have an excellent education system, you need to reinvent, you need to reimagine, and you need to really innovate together with your peers and collaborate. Thank you very much.
We have 2 great presentations. The first one is how to advance. The first one is MOOC, flipped learning, and K-MOOC. And then reinventing education from both 2 presenters. We have 2 discussions about their MOOC, how to proceed and how it can be implied in our context, and what we need to aware before we launch our K-MOOC systems.
우리 지금 현재 우리 MOOC에 대해서 굉장히 관심이 많은 것입니다. 그래서 앞으로 우리 그 교육을 좀 바꿀 수 있는 하나의 큰 모멘텀일 수도 있고, 또 우리가 교육의 진정한 기회균등을 이룰 수 있는 가능성도 있다 봅니다. 그런데 중요한 것은 이제 우리가 무국이 앞으로 이제 정말 잘 돼야 하고, 그런 점에서 이게 굉장히 서스테이너블하게 지속 가능하게 되어야 된다 생각합니다. 그래서 지속 가능하다는 것은 우리가 이제 크게 나누어서 공급자 측면, 그 다음에 우리가 그 고객, 학습자, 사용자 측면이 있고, 세 번째로는 이걸 운영하는 주체인 플랫폼 측면이 있다 봅니다. 이 세 가지가 다 엮여져서 우리가 정말 지속 가능한 모델이 되어야 된다 생각합니다. 그런 점에서 이제 각각 문제를 한번 가능성도 있지만 우리가 해결해야 될 과제도 있다 봅니다. 첫 번째로 우리가 공급자 측면에서 본다면은 대학과 교수들이 어떻게 해서 이 과목을 내놓을 수 있느냐. 지금까지 우리 교실에서 교수님들이 자기 강의 절대로 안 보여주려고 그러는데, 어떻게 해서 이걸 녹화해서 세상에 공짜로 내놓는다는 것은 완전히 이거는 새로운 생각이단 말이죠. 주변에 등을 떼밀려 가지고 억지로 낼 수는 없단 말이죠. 스스로 낼 동기를 만들어 줘야 되는데, 그 명분을 만들어 줘야 되고, 이게 하나의 과제라 봅니다. 지금은 이제 초기 단계니까 학교에서 여러 가지 우리가 파이낸셜 스포트도 좀 주고 해가지고 이렇게 권유를 하지만은, 앞으로 더 많은 과목을 만들려면 굉장히 많은 도전이 있는 것 같습니다. 지금도 세계적인 이제 무국에 보면은 각 대학마다 대개 한 5개 내지 한 10개 이내 과목을 내고 있고, 더 많은 과목을 내야 됩니다. 그래서 이게 앞으로 해결해야 될 과제라 보는데요. 제 개인적인 생각으로는 교수님들이 단순히 뭐 돈 몇 푼 때문에 과목을 절대 낸다고 보지 않고요. 제가 제일 중요한 것 생각하는 것은 자기 수업에서 이 자기가 힘들게 만든 무국 강의를 이용을 해야 된다 봅니다. 그래서 그런 면에서 자기 강의를 잘 만들어서 녹화를 해서 이렇게 인터넷에 올라가 있으면은 자기 수업 시간에서 이게 옛날에 하던 강의를 반복할 필요가 없잖아요. 그럼 강의 시간도 많이 남으니까 그 시간에 뭐든지 다른 짓을 할 수 있다는 거죠. 지금까지 우리가 못했던 거, 토론이나 뭐 실험이나 실습이나 팀 학습이나 이런 걸 할 수 있다는 거죠. 그래서 아까 두 분이 이제 말씀하신 결국은 플립드 러닝처럼 되게 될 것이라는 겁니다. 그 플립드 러닝이라는 게 중요한 것은 이제 수업 시간에 하던 강의를 갖다가 온라인으로 보내고 수업 시간에는 좀 더 유익한 일을 한다는 것입니다. 그래서 저희 카이스트에서는 한 3년 전부터 뭐 이런과 관계없이 자체적인 어떤 철학과 이제 비전을 가지고 수업 시간에서 이제 강의를 없애버리는 그 프로그램을 하고 있습니다. 저희들은 그걸 에듀케이션 3.0이라 해가지고 추진해 오고 있는데, 그게 하다 보니까 이름이 뭐 플립드 러닝하고 비슷하게 된 거예요. 철학은 뭐 같은 거지만. 그래서 올해 한 100과목을 하고 있고요. 한 5년 후에는 한 30%를 바꾸려고 합니다. 그런데 자연히 그렇게 하게 되니까 강의를 녹화하게 되면은 녹화한 강의를 잘 좀 더 따듬으면 뭐 무국으로도 보낼 수 있고, 또 무국에 참여해서 만든 강의가 또 이리 올 수 있는 거죠. 저희 카이스트에서는 또 작년에 이제 콜세라에 이제 가입해가지고 지금 세 과목을 하고 있습니다. 그리고 내년에는 좀 더 많이 과목을 만들려고 그러고 있고요. 굉장히 이제 세계적으로 많은 사람들이 듣기 때문에 굉장히 반응도 좋았고, 또 그것 때문에 이제 카이스트를 처음 알게 됐다는 사람들도 한 85% 이상이 되더라고요. 그래서 학교로 볼 땐 충분한 이유가 있습니다. 또 교수님은 볼 때 자기가 그 과목을 올리고 난 뒤에 국제학회 가면은 젊은 교수들이 자기를 많이 알아보더라. 그래서 굉장히 행복하게 생각하고 있습니다. 그래서 저희들은 이제 이런 플립드 러닝하고 결합돼야 된다는 게 사실이고요. 그렇지만 좀 더 다양한 모티베이션이 필요한 것 같습니다. 그래서 현실적으로는 이제 밖에서는 많이 이야기하지만 교수님들은 아직도 많은 대다수 교수님이나 학생들이 이 무국이 뭔지에 대해서 아직 잘 모르고 계신 것 같아요. 그래서 밖에서 갖고 있는 기대하고 실제 내부적으로 교수나 학생이 이걸 이해하고 여기 동참하게 되는 데까지 시간이 좀 더 걸릴 거라고 봅니다. 두 번째 이슈는 사용자 이슈인데요. 그래서 우리 이 무국의 사용자가 누군가 살펴보면은 제일 큰 사용자는 아무래도 산업체에 계신 전문가들이라 봅니다. 그래서 자기가 업무를 하면서 자기 개발해서 필요해가지고 스스로 공부를 한다든지, 본래 전공하고 다른 분야의 일을 하게 되니까 또 그 지식 보충을 위해서 스스로 공부하게 됩니다. 그래서 뭐 저 티벳 산골에 있는 뭐 저 학교를 못 다닌 학생이 뭐 공부한다. 그거는 이제 스토리에 나오는 이야기고 실제로는 학사 이상의 학위를 가진 전문가들이 많이 듣는다는 게 이렇게 통계적으로 나와 있습니다. 그리고 또 하나의 사용자는 제가 볼 때 자기 학교 내 학생들 또 자기 수업에서 사용하는 거 이게 굉장히 중요하다 봅니다. 그런데 아직도 우리가 이 묵 과목을 듣는 분들이 왜 듣는지에 대해서 동기에 대해서 진정한 그 필요성에 대해서는 아직 정확히 다 모르고 있습니다. 그래서 우리나라 예를 보면은 대개는 학교에서 어려운 공부를 왜 하라 그러느냐, 학위 주고 학점 주니까 공부하지 뭐 스스로 뭐 내가 알고 싶어서 공부하는 사람은 그렇지 많지 않을 수도 있습니다. 그래서 서로 다양한 이 니즈가 있기 때문에 이걸 잘 파악을 해서 대응하는 게 필요하다 봅니다. 특히 이제 지금은 대학들이 과목을 내놓는 이유가 특별한 그 동기가 좀 확실하지 않아요. 그렇기 때문에 실제로 많은 분들이 사용자가 원하는 과목들하고 실제로 나와 있는 과목들하고 서로 수요 공급이 좀 잘 안 맞는다 봅니다. 현재는. 그래서 앞으로는 이 니즈를 잘 이해해서 그에 맞는 과목을 많이 만들도록 하는 것이 굉장히 중요하다 봅니다. 마지막으로 이제 플랫폼 문제인데 우리나라 이제 K-MOOC도 이제 해야 된다 그러는데 제일 중요한 것은 선도하는 대학들이 여기다가 과목을 많이 내도록 만드는 게 중요하다 봅니다. 그러기 위해서는 대학들한테 명분을 주는 게 중요하다 봅니다. 교수님들하고 내가 과목을 내놓는데 우리 대학 이름으로 내가 이게 서비스 된다는 이런 명분을 줘야만 대학들이 좀 더 적극적으로 나오지 않겠나 생각됩니다. 그런데 이제 미국의 예를 보면 아까 MIT나 뭐 하버드나 스탠포드나 이런 선도한 대학들이 처음에 주도를 하다 보니까 자연스럽게 거기에 참여하지 않을 수가 없게 되었습니다. 다른 대학들이. 그 대학들은 또 시작한 대학들은 처음에 돈도 많이 투자를 했어요. 그런데 지금 이제 우리나라에서 K-MOOC을 한다 이러면은 우리나라에서 선도하는 대학들이 돈을 투자할 수 있느냐, 그 다음에 두 번째로 그만큼 리더십을 가질 수 있느냐, 이게 간단한 일이 아니란 말이죠. 이게 많은 노력을 해야 되고 또 인력도 유지해야 되고 이 비즈니스 모델도 가져야 되는데 우리나라 그 선도 대학들이 그런 역량이 있겠느냐. 또 우리나라는 마켓이 적어요. 국내를 마켓으로 하다 보면은 이 규모가 그만큼 안 되기 때문에 아까 우리 자격증이나 이런 수입 가지고 충분히 않을 수가 있습니다. 그래서 정부에서 좀 지원해서 정부 중심으로 하는 것도 저는 의미가 있다 봅니다. 대신에 정부에서 뭐 한다고 해서 우리 대학들이 교수들이 자진해서 과목을 공짜로 내놓지는 않을 거라 봅니다. 그래서 그걸 어떻게 잘 이해를 해가지고 이분들한테 끌어들이느냐 하는 것이 중요하다 봅니다. 그런 면에서 저는 우리 이제 내셔널 묵, K-MOOC 같은 경우에는 좀 더 다른 어프로치로 우리 인프라를 제공해주고 각 대학들이 자기 이름으로 서비스 받을 수 있게, 그리고 우리가 K-MOOC 입장에서는 우리 학생들을 갖다가 통합 관리하는, 그리고 통합적인 서비스를 제공하는 부분에 집중하면은 좋을 것이라 생각됩니다. 그래서 앞으로 또 많은 가능성도 있고 또 기대도 큰데 우리가 어떻게 하느냐에 따라서 많이 달라진다 봅니다. 제일 중요한 것은 대학들이 이걸 가지고 단순히 뭐 수입을 더 창출한다 이런 거하고는 별로 충분한 이유가 안 될 것 같고요. 자기 대학의 교육을 한번 혁신을 해보겠다 하면은 이게 하나의 좋은 선택이 될 것이라 생각합니다. 감사합니다.
Good afternoon. It's a great honor to be at this important conference in Korea. For my university, we are extremely proud of our many distinguished alumni in Korea. We are extremely pleased to have such important university partners in Korea, and we are especially proud of our role in educating your second president, Youngwha. I will talk very briefly about the context of the University of Edinburgh with regard to MOOCs, and then as I'm a discussant, although it gives me great pain, I will tell you some ways in which I disagree with the three previous speakers, because without disagreement there is no discussion, but then I will tell you ways I agree with them, and looking at my notes, I agree with them about 2/3 of the time and disagree with them about 1/3, so it's quite balanced. What is the context? Well, the University of Edinburgh is regarded by many as the non-US leader in MOOCs. Obviously the leadership is with MIT, Stanford, Harvard, Berkeley. Outside the United States, we have grown in this area very quickly. And to remind you, MOOCs are only about 2.5 years old as measured from the first serious media attention or the launch of the platforms. Before MOOCs came along, the University of Edinburgh was quite strong in electronic learning. We had successful online master's courses, particularly in veterinary science, where we had been given an award by the Queen, but also in other professional schools, such as law, such as human medicine, and such as education. So online masters were not new to us. We had, in the period before the MOOCs, funded 50 different technological innovations at the course level in relation to things like assessment, simulations, interactions, and these electronic innovations were being used in our regular classrooms. And we had a distance education initiative in place where we were trying to, based on our successful experience in online masters in the professional schools, ensure that every school of the university had a good online masters. And one of the impacts for us of the MOOCs has been to see a rapid spread in our accredited online teaching and masters. We started with 6 MOOCs. Our most successful, to our surprise, was an introduction to philosophy. That's reached 160,000 people. Particularly pleasing and surprising to us was the number of high school students who studied this MOOC on philosophy. We had a MOOC on astrobiology and the search for extraterrestrial life. This has been a very attractive MOOC because of the different MOOCs in the world, it is the one that has probably had the highest persistence, which is that having studied this MOOC, these distributed students who work together electronically have continued to go and get galaxy information, continued to remain working together, looking for new astronomical things. We had a successful MOOC in artificial intelligence planning, and we were pleased what that did for our reputation. We were very pleased. We had a MOOC on MOOCs, a MOOC about how MOOCs work, which demonstrated all the different techniques one can use in a MOOC. It came from our School of Education, and unlike some other MOOCs on MOOCs which failed, ours has been immensely successful and is used very much by people who wish to develop MOOCs at other universities. We had a MOOC on equine nutrition, that is a MOOC on what you feed horses. Of the different MOOCs I'm aware of in the world, this MOOC has had the most retention and the most completion. And we think that's because the 16,000 students who took it all had a horse. So they were very seriously interested in all the detail because they wanted to know what to feed their horse. And we had a MOOC based on a first-year course called Our Changing World, a very, very broad course, and we were pleased with that success. We were so pleased that we had a party on the success of the MOOCs. We had an incredibly positive academic senate. So after a year at the University of Edinburgh, we felt this was very positive. What have been the consequences? The consequences have been many more MOOCs. We've now had 1 million learners. The consequence has been a big boost for our work in astrobiology. The consequence has been MOOCs that directly feed into recruitment for online master's courses in areas like artificial intelligence planning, in equine health, in electronic learning. And we've seen some good growth. We've seen a growth in course completion certificates through one of our partners, Coursera. We've seen the use of MOOC material in regular courses. We're very proud of Peter Higgs, who got the Nobel Prize for the Higgs boson. So we produced a very nice MOOC called Understanding the Higgs Boson. It's quite a hard thing to understand. That was successful, and immediately we started using parts of that really quite technical MOOC in our regular teaching. We have got new online masters in some areas we didn't expect, so I'm delighted that we have done that in philosophy. And if you look at the MOOCs, they are part of the university ecology. They have added to it. They're not replacing anything, they're not destroying anything, but our university ecology is much richer. And a particular thing, we all know that MOOCs have no physical location, but one thing we are seeing is quite an emphasis on timing. So when one's studying a MOOC, week 3 is different from week 4 in the MOOC, because the students are need to be doing the same sort of stuff. And some of our MOOCs have been very time dependent. We did a MOOC on understanding the Scottish independence debate, and this followed the political events in Scotland week by week. So that is our position, and the University of Edinburgh position has to be, MOOCs have been a great success. They've not cost us very much. We reckon about $1 per MOOC learner overall, and they have really generated other activity. Where do I disagree with the speakers? Well, I disagree with the first speaker, Professor Im, and I disagree with Professor Lee, the discussant, in terms of the faculty. Our experience is the faculty are not slow. The faculty are very, very keen to do this. I also disagree with Professor Im. MOOCs for us are certainly not a cost saver. They add money, but they also add value, so it's worth it. I disagree with his focus on competency-based education. We see MOOCs as contributing to the whole broad range, including the most abstract work in the humanities. I'm a bit puzzled about the idea of a Korean platform in the sense that knowledge is not Korean, it is not Scottish, it is not American, it is world knowledge. Perhaps the reason for a Korean MOOC platform is to secure money from the Korean government. But I guess I would disagree with Professor Lee a bit in terms that he emphasized, this is an area which is not easy in terms of time, staff, and effort. Well, to be honest, we have found it quite easy. With Vice President Heinlein, he emphasized, and I love this old manuscript that he showed, he emphasized that education has not changed over the centuries, and that is not true. Education has changed over the centuries. From the point of view of Edinburgh, that was the center of the Enlightenment. We saw in the 18th century notions of evidence and notions of skeptical inquiry being introduced, which had not previously been there. And we saw in the 20th century, and some of the institutions he's familiar with, like Harvard and MIT, were very strong on this, the move from an emphasis on declarative knowledge, knowing what, to procedural knowledge, knowing how, and particularly an emphasis to the idea of meta skills, the idea of particularly learning how to learn. That again has been a major shift in what we do in universities. I also must observe that blended learning is really not new. The Open University, where I worked for many years, has been using blended learning for at least 40 years. So those are some points of disagreement. But they are outnumbered by my points of agreement, and I thought all the two presentations and the discussion was excellent. I agree strongly with Professor Jinhyouk Im. Education is in transition. MOOCs can increase quality. There is a great value for flipped learning. Open education is really vital. All education can be affected, and we do really see a new industrial sector here. I agree strongly with Vice President Johanness Heinlein. Knowledge is the currency of the 20th century. Technology is the main change driver. We are seeing virtual communities, an emphasis on open access. We also see, and I think it is very important, and it is a strong Edinburgh experience, to see the way things like MOOCs improve the value of the residential campus education. Learning analytics is vital. My own doctorate was in this area, but so many years ago that we had not enough data to do it properly. His 5 questions on residential education, module size, communication, certification, and data pathways are key. Absolutely right on the need for research, flexibility, and localization. And it is crucial, and that is why we have to be very sophisticated. If you do promote a Korean platform, we do need open common technology standards. These are vital and very unhelpful if platforms move in different directions. Federal models, very, very good. For the University of Edinburgh, we have a very interesting federal model. We have had another award from the Queen recently, and that is for an online master's in advanced surgery. So that might be a little scary. We are teaching people around the world advanced surgical techniques. It is a little less scary when you know that they have to already be a surgeon, they have to be in a hospital where they can do surgery, that the modern surgeon uses a computer and a mouse a lot, because lots of surgical devices are computer driven. But the most comforting thing is it's blended learning. The advanced surgeons have to come to Edinburgh for 2 weeks, and when they come to Edinburgh they meet a federation, and the federation is between the University Medical School and the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. And when we test them, we give them both, if they're successful, a master's degree, but also a certificate, a license to practice from the Royal College of Surgeons. And finally, I agree most strongly with one of Professor Lee's last remarks. This is a very valuable and critical way of promoting equity in education, and it is certainly not ephemeral. It is here to stay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all presenters and discussions and audience together, because I can really feel your interest about the K-MOOC, because I had more than 10 questions from the floor. This is question papers. So actually, as a moderator, I prepared 4 different questions, each of them. But I think we don't have enough time to share your questions with our presenters and discussions. So if you don't mind, I think give the rest of our time for the presenters and discussant with you. Is it okay? No? 여러분들이 양해를 해주신다면 그 모더레이터가 질문을 할 수 있도록 구조적인 몇 가지를 준비를 했는데, 그걸 생략을 하고 여러분들이 지금 한 12개 정도 질문이 들어왔습니다. 그래서 제가 이분들에게 퀘스천 페이퍼를 드리고 좀 준비할 수 있도록 잠깐 하면 어떨까 싶습니다. 괜찮습니까? 감사합니다. 그 K-MOOC가 이미 저희가 시작이 돼서 11월 중순에 플랫폼이 완성이 되고 내년 5월에 우리가 아마도 데모를 돌릴 수 있을 것 같고요. 내년 가을쯤 되면 전체적으로 서빙이 되지 않을까 싶습니다. 오늘 지금 그 2분의 발표자는 울산대학의 임진혁 교수님과 에덱스의 부사장이 그 발표를 했었는데, 이미 이제 MIT하고 하버드하고 해서 공동으로 출자했던 그 에덱스에서 하고 있는 거를 소개를 하고, 또 임진혁 교수님 같은 경우는 국내에서 울산과기대에서 진행을 하고 계시고, 또 토론자로 오셨던 이태욱 교수님 같은 경우는 카이스트에서 지금 하고 계십니다. 그리고 마지막에 토론을 하셨던 에딘버러 대학의 총장님께서는 이미 이제 90년대부터 에듀케이셔널 테크놀로지 쪽으로 해서 여러 가지 상도 받고 지속적으로 본인이 20년 이상을 해오면서 영국의 이제 독자적인 무크 시스템을 구축을 해서 하고 있습니다. 그래서 아마 여러분들이 그 토론에 많은 시간을 보내면서 그야말로 지적인 즐거움을 충족시킬 수 있는 시간이 되지 않을까 싶습니다. Anybody ready to answer? Who? Professor Lim? You first? Okay. He got 3 different question papers.
Yeah, this question from Professor Lee Seung-woo in Kookmin University. He mentioned here that excellent contents are already available from global MOOCs, but due to language barrier, only a fraction of students in Korea can access to them.
Lim, if his audience is okay, why don't we just present in Korean? Don't you mind? Is it okay?
예, 그럼 그렇게 하겠습니다. 예, 이 교수님께서 질문하신 그 내용은 이렇습니다. 지금 좋은 컨텐츠가 미리 지금 글로벌 무크에 많이 있는데 언어적인 문제 때문에 이게 잘 쓰이지 않는 게 아닌가. 그래서 이런 그 번역하는 옵션에 대해서 어떻게 생각하느냐. 그리고 한국 정부가 K-MOOC 디벨롭하는데 어떤 역할을 할 것인가. 이 2가지를 질문하셨는데, 첫 번째 그 아까 제가 보여드린 것처럼 16개국 상위 16개국 한국이 없다. 저는 메인 이유가 언어적인 문제 때문에 그렇다. 그래서 지금 번역하는 문제는 여러분 아시면 그 숙명대학에서 스노우라 그래서 자발적으로 그 번역을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 스노우는 누구든지 오픈되어 있기 때문에 번역에 관한 뭐 거기서 다 번역을 해줄 수는 없지만 그래서 중요한 건 번역하고 있는 그런 자발적으로 하고 있고, 두 번째는 칸 아카데미 같은 데는 계속 그 자체가 영어 번역을 다른 외국어로 번역을 하고 있습니다. 근데 이런 것이 콜세라나 에덱스도 가면은 이제 랭귀지 번역하는 것이 그렇게 이제 기계적으로 되는 부분들이 있기 때문에 유튜브도 대상이, 그래서 이제 그런 프로바이더가 컨텐츠를 번역해 주는 부분도 있지만 저는 이 번역보다도 더 중요한 것은 이 러닝 커뮤니티, 그걸 질문을 하고 물어보고 토론을 하는데 다 영어로 해야 되니까 하는 것이 힘들지 않는가. 그래서 이제 K-MOOC이 되면은 그 컨텐츠는 거기서 빌려오든지 한국에 교과서 한국 대학에서 올리면 그건 물론 영어 문제가 없지만 만약에 우리가 컨텐츠를 가져온다. 지금 사우디 정부나 저 중국 정부나 프랑스 정부가 다 언어적인 문제를 해서 이걸 가져와서 자기들 언어로 쓰고, 그리고 러닝 커뮤니티, 그 배우는 과정은 그 나라 언어로 해주기 때문에 그런 것 때문에 이제 이 자기들 나라의 버전이 필요하다. 물론 이제 한국 정부 자체에 우리가 가진 우리의 컨텐츠도 물론 있어야 되겠죠. 그래서 그런 측면에서 K-MOOC이 필요한 것이고, 왜 정부가 하는 역할이 뭔가 이런데, 우선 아까 제가 말씀드린 것처럼 이 미국에서는 민간에서 이런 게 시작이 되지만 한국에서는 지금 민간에서 이런 걸 할 만큼 그런 영향이 없고, 그렇게 정부가 해주면 우선 장점이 우선 그 일괄적으로 효과적으로 해줄 수 있는 그런 게 장점이고, 이제 그런 플랫폼을 정부가 해주면은 컨텐츠는 결국 대학들이나 민간이나 컨텐츠를 정부가 제공한다는 건 절대 아닙니다. 우리가 저 에덱스도 마찬가지고요. 컨텐츠는 각별의 기관들이 올리는 것이고요. 그리고 이제 또 정부가 해줄 수 있는 건 물론 이제 알지만은 캐럿과 스틱, 정부가 따라서는 뭐 그런 걸 하는 대학들에게는 평가 아니면 뭐 자금 지원을 해준다든가 이렇게 해서 지원해 줄 수도 있는 그런 측면이 저는 있을 거라고 봅니다. 예. 그다음에 두 번째 질문은 이렇습니다. 무크의 성공에 대해서는 성공에도 불구하고 회의적인 의견이 많이 나오고 있다. 온라인 교육의 장점이 많지만 여전히 전통적인 교육 방식이 중요시 여겨지고 있다. 이런 상황에서 무크가 오프라인 대학 교육을 대체할 수 있는가? 무크가 대학 등록교나 교육비 절감에 실질적 기회가 될 수 있을 것인가? 무크가 유료화되고 있는데 비용이 높아지지 않겠는가? 이랬는데 제가 말씀드린 것처럼 무크 자체는 오픈 에듀케이션, 좀 프리, 누구나 들을 수 있게 이런 것이 구체적인 목적으로 되어 있고, 단지 서티피킷을 요구하는 사람에게 작은 피해를 받는 건 여러분 다 아실 겁니다. 이 모델은 바뀌지 않을 거라고 봅니다. 그래서 이것이 바로 대학하고 경쟁하지는 않는다고 제가 말씀드리고, 그러나 이것이 이제 그 컨텐츠가 대학으로 들어올 때, 플립드 러닝 형태로 들어올 때는 이제 다른 얘기가 됩니다. 제가 에덱스에 질문을 해보니까요, 5만 달러 먼저 내고 500명 학생에 한해서 학생당 50불씩 이런 모델이 벌써 있습니다. 그래서 그런 거는 이제 무료가 절대 아닙니다. 대학으로 들어올 때는. 그래서 이제 그런 경우에는 우리가 대비를 해야 될 것이고, 또 한국에서 우리 컨텐츠가 올라가면 뭐 그건 또 다른 얘기가 될 것입니다. 그러나 이제 미국에 있는 컨텐츠를 우리가 가져와서 선다면 또 그런 문제도 있는 것이고요. 그래서 무크 자체를 가지고 대학 교육을 저는 대체한다고 절대 보지 않습니다. 왜? 그 플립 러닝이 돼서 정말 교수와 학생 간의 교감이 일어나고 그런 부분이 빠지면은 완전히 온라인 교육이 되기 때문에 그건 아니라고 봅니다. 예, 그다음에 오픈형 교육이 무크라 했는데 온라인 교육이라는 측면에서 일방적인 교수가 되는 것이 아닌가. 그래서 학생의 이해도 그에 따른 피드백을 할 수 없다는 측면에서 클로즈드 교육에 가깝지 않는가 이렇게 말씀을 하셨는데요. 여기서 오픈이라는 말은 anybody, 누구나 들을 수 있다 이런 뜻에서 오픈이라는 뜻입니다. 물론 이제 오픈이 가진 또 하나의 의미는 무료다. 물론 무료가 아닐 수도 있지만, 그러나 오픈이 가진 두 가지 뜻, 누구나 거의 무료의 수준으로 들을 수 있게 해준다 이런 뜻에서 오픈이라는 뜻인데, 물론 이 안에서 지금 한 사람이 16만 명을 가르친다, 그게 가능하겠는가? 예, 우리가 이제 전통적인 방법은 교수가 학생을 이렇게 피드백을 주고 받는데, 이제 오픈 교육이 되고 이렇게 무크 형태로 가면 peer-to-peer instruction으로 가게 됩니다. 학생이 학생을 서로 지도하고 그 평가를 하고 이렇게 해서, 물론 자동화되는 부분이죠. 교수와 학생이라는 이런 관계에서 이제 학생과 학생 간에 자기들이 평가하고 측정하고 이런 개념으로 바뀌지 않고는 매니지할 수가 없다는 걸 여러분 다 아시죠? 예, 그런 측면에서는 여기서 제가 말하는 클로즈 시스템이라는 표현은 입학을 해서 들어오는 사람에게만 제공되는 교육인가, 아니면 누구든지 들을 수 있는가, 이런 측면에서 봐주시기를 바랍니다. 예, 이상입니다.
Okay, thank you. And Johanness, ready? I have one more question papers for you, but it's in Korean. So let me translate it and then deliver it to you last. So you will be last.
Okay.
First you answer,
Okay.
then
First answer
yeah.
these.
Mhm.
Okay. So there was one question which I'd like to answer really quickly. It was a question about copyright. So who owns the content? At edX, and I believe it's the same for all other MOOC providers, the institution continues to own the content, or in some instances, and this is different by country or even region, the university owns the content. So in general, the MOOC providers simply get a license to distribute the content with distribution channel. We don't own the content. The content remains with the original author. And the original author is free to use the content in whichever way they like. They could use it for a book or in other channels and so on. So just quickly an answer on copyright. There's another question about whether research has been performed to understand students' learning habits and whether at the outset of edX that was one of our goals. Yes, it was very much one of our goals to engage in research and to publish research. There have been numerous peer-reviewed papers already on the first MOOCs, and we'll continue to engage in the research with our partner universities, and we hope there'll be a lot more. I'll give one example, a very simple example, which is true for any MOOC provider. One of the first pieces of research we engaged in was to look at the duration of videos. So generally speaking, MOOC platforms provide interactive learning sequence. So there's a video, then there's an exercise, there might be some reading, and then there's another video. And we did a lot of testing with long videos, so your typical 45-minute or even 60, 90-minute lecture, and very short videos. And across all courses, irrespective of content, and across all platforms, this is true. The ideal length of video is anywhere between 3 to 7 minutes. After 7 minutes, learners, no matter where in the world they are, they drop off. So, that's an interesting learning. Right at the beginning that we understood that if you use online modalities, you have to rethink how you present your material. It's not good enough to simply film a lecture and have it on TV for an hour. It has to be interactive. Last question that I want to answer now, because I know there's so many wonderful questions, and I think that's fantastic. How are other countries engaging in their MOOC endeavors, and what are they doing with regards to funding? So again, I'll pick on a couple examples. The first country actually to adopt a national MOOC platform was France. They collaborated with edX and they used our open source platform to establish a nationwide platform that's open to all educational institutions. So the Ministry of Education there funds the platform, the running of the platform, and the universities provide that content on the platform primarily in French. That's one example. Another example is in Jordan, the Queen Rania Foundation is establishing a national or an Arab language platform that is very targeted towards specific needs in that region of the world. So it's targeted towards youth employment, it's targeted towards women and advancing women careers in society. And there, the funding has been provided and continues to be provided for very specific content. So they've identified which content they believe is important within the society, and there the Queen Rania Foundation provides specific funding to develop courses. The last example I give is in China. Xuetangx is a platform founded by the main universities, and they collaborate with the Ministry of Education in China. They're a for-profit endeavor. What they will do is they license content, they collaborate with edX, they make content available in Mandarin, and they will charge students for it, so that's how they recoup their funds. So in summary, there are three different ways. The government can fund all educational endeavors, the government funds very specific targeted endeavors, or it's a private sector market where it becomes a marketplace and the learners pay for the use of content.
Thank you. And Professor Lee.
예, 감사합니다. 질문 제가 크게 세 개 있는데 먼저 첫 번째 질문은 사이버 과학 영재 교육, 차세대 영재 기업인 교육 등 대학생은 아니지만 학생들 상대로 하는 상방향 교육이 예전부터 활발했습니다. 여기에 한국형 무기 추가로 더해져야 할 것은 무엇일까요? 제가 지금 하고 있는 건 자세히는 모르겠지만요. 무기에서 가장 중요한 것은 첫째 그 단어에서 나와 있듯이 개방한다는 겁니다. 오픈. 모든 걸 누구나 들을 수 있게 공개한다는 거죠. 근데 이게 갖는 의미라는 것은 뭐냐 하면은 결국 아주 많은 사람이 듣는다는 겁니다. 매시브하다는 거죠. 그래서 굉장히 많은 사람이 듣는다. 또 하나는 굉장히 많은 대학에 많은 과목들이 많은 교수가 참여해서 나온다는 거죠. 앞으로. 그래서 이게 많다는 게 중요합니다. 그러다 보니까 우리가 실제 과목을 진행하는 데 있어 가지고 거의 자동적으로 진행되어야 된다는 거죠. 교수가 그 많은 학생을 일일이 다 대응할 수는 없는 거죠. 그래서 자동화된다는 게 중요하고 또 하나는 학생하고 교수하고 간에 좀 이렇게 상호작용이 많아야 된다는 게 우리가 바라는 바인데 온라인이 되면은 특히 이 많은 학생을 대상으로 하면은 그런 상호작용을 하기가 어려워지는 거죠. 질의응답이라든지 이런 걸 일일이 대응을 못합니다. 그러다 보니까 결국은 학생들끼리 서로 토론하고 심지어 평가도 같이 하고 학생들끼리 스터디 그룹이 되고 우리가 지금까지 하고 전혀 다른 새로운 어떤 학생끼리 학습하는 이런 소셜 러닝 형태로 발전하게 된다는 겁니다. 그게 좀 다른 것이고요. 그래서 앞으로 더 많은 좋은 대학에 좋은 교수님들 과목이 굉장히 많이 나오게 되고 많은 학생들끼리 각 나라에 전 세계적으로 많은 학생들이 서로 협력해서 학습을 하게 된다는 게 굉장히 좀 다른 점이라 봅니다. 이게 우리가 배우는 게 선생님한테 교수님한테만 배우는 게 아니거든요. 다른 학생들 통해서 배우는 게 더 크고 또 자기도 가르치면서 자기도 친구를 도와주면서 자기가 배우는 게 더 크다 봅니다. 예, 두 번째 질문입니다. 한국형 무역을 개발하고 새롭게 교육 혁신을 하는 것도 좋지만 교육 현장에 적용하는 데는 몇 가지 문제점도 있을 것 같습니다. 그래서 교수자와 학습자에게 어떻게 설득하고 전파할 수 있는지 방안이 있으면은 말씀해 주시기 바랍니다. 가장 어려운 질문입니다. 그래서 대학에서 교수님들이 사실은 굉장히 우리가 일반적으로 말할 때 가장 바뀌기 힘든 분들입니다. 저도 대학에 있지만은 교수님들은 다 개개인이 독립된 주식회사입니다. 총장님이 뭘 한다고 전혀 어떻게 움직이지 않습니다. 총장님은 뭐를 하자, 우리 뭐 플립드 러닝을 하자 하지만은 그건 또 다른 이야기예요. 교수님들이 하는 것은 교수님들 팔목을 비틀 수도 없고 그렇습니다. 또 돈을 인센티브를 좀 들 수도 있지만은 교수님들이 그 정도 인센티브 가지고 움직이는 분들이 아닙니다. 그래서 제가 볼 때는 교수님들은 명예에 삽니다. 명예. 자기 프라이드하고 명예, 명성 때문에 살기 때문에 그런 걸 잘 자극을 해야 된다는 거죠. 다른 훌륭한 교수님들도 또 다른 대학의 훌륭한 분들도 이렇게 하더라 하는 게 중요하고요. 두 번째는 제가 있다면은 일단 어떻게든 한번 해보시게 하는 게 중요한 것 같아요. 처음에 약간 돈을 뭐 들이든지 어떻게 하든지 해가지고 약간의 한번 해보게 되면은 해보고 난 데는 다 바뀌셔요. 저희들 경험으로. 하기 전에는 이게 부담이 많다. 특히 연구 중심 대학에서 교수들이 승진하는데 논문 쓰고 뭐 이렇게 하는데 바쁘지. 교육은 말로는 평가에 고려한다지만 실질적으로 고려한 적을 한 번도 본 적이 없습니다. 잘 못했을 때는 보지만 잘했는 것은 별로 보지 않습니다. 그래서 교수님들 움직이게 하는 것은 다른 분들이 해보신 그 좋은 경험을 공유하는 것, 그게 굉장히 중요한 것 같아요. 해보니까 좋더라. 그리고 나도 직접 한번 해보니까 그러면 달라진다는 겁니다. 그래서 이 고정관념을 바꾸게 하는 게 굉장히 힘들고요. 그래서 이게 간단한 문제는 아닌 것 같습니다. 학교 내에서 굉장히 이런 문화를 만들고 선도하는 교수님들 그룹을 만들고 분위기를 만들어가는 게 중요한 것 같아요. 뭐 교수 평가, 학과 평가에 넣는다 해가지고 별로 좋지 않은 것, 그게 최악의 방법인 것 같습니다. 예. 제일 어려운 문제이기 때문에 제가 정답은 없다고 말씀드립니다. 마지막 질문입니다. 마지막 질문은 영어로 적으셨는데 제가 죄송합니다. 영어로 지금 이게 라이팅을 100% 이해는 잘 읽지는 못하겠는데 제가 두 번째 질문부터 이제 이해한 대로 보겠습니다.
제가 밑줄 그어놓은 부분 있을 텐데요.
예?
밑줄 그어놓은 부분.
예. 글쎄 있는데 이제 대강 이해를 하고 볼게요. 박진영 씨가 질문하신 겁니다. 아마 고등학생 같은데요. 우리 고등학교 클래스에도 이런 걸 갖다가 전통적인 클래스에 적용할 수 있겠느냐. 또 우리 창조경제 이런 데서 또 창조경제 센터라든지 이런 데 이용할 수 있겠냐는 겁니다. 당연히 저는 고등학교에도 가능하다 봅니다. 실제로 우리가 아까 뭐 모국은 아니지만 플립드 러닝 관점에서는 미국 뭐 뉴욕인가에 아예 그 플립드 스쿨이라고 있어요. 어떤 중학교가 완전히 모든 과목을 플립드 러닝으로 바꾼 학교가 있었고 그 성과는 굉장히 좋았다고 뉴욕타임스에 보도한 바도 있습니다. 그래서 제가 부산 영재고에도 교사님들한테 이 뭐 설명을 드렸더만 굉장히 좋아하셨고요. 이미 또 하고 계신 분도 좀 계셨어요. 그래서 고등학교에도 충분히 적용 가능하고요. 무국이라는 관점에서도 고등학교용 그 교재를 개발하면 저는 더 효과적이라고 봅니다. 이게 듣는 사람이 많아야 되거든요. 우리 대학 과목은 워낙에 과목이 다양해가지고 한 과목 개발해도 그 과목의 서브젝이 다양하기 때문에 듣는 사람이 그렇게 많지 않을 수가 있습니다. 그런데 고등학교 과목은 컨텐츠가 딱 어느 정도 제한되어 있으니까 개발을 하면은 굉장히 많은 사람이 듣습니다. 그래서 좀 더 효과적일 수 있다 보거든요. 그리고 실제로 우리 칸 아카데미 같은 경우에는 우리가 초중고 그 과정을 다 하고 있기 때문에 굉장히 그 유용할 거라 봅니다. 아마 칸 아카데미가 조만간 우리나라에서 한글로 번역돼서 서비스가 아마 내년쯤에 되는 걸로 알고 있습니다. 그래서 그렇게 되면은 이게 어마어마한 임팩트가 있을 거라 봅니다. 말하자면 우리나라의 그 온라인 그 교육업체들이 상당히 좀 영향을 받지 않을까 저는 생각이 듭니다. 굉장히 그냥 하이 퀄리티의 그 초중고 내용이 이제 우리가 온라인으로 가능하게 된다는 겁니다. 그리고 또 그 이제 첫 번째 질문은 제가 정확하게 이제 이해는 못했지만 우리가 여기
Okay, Professor Lee, because of time limitation, why don't you respond after this session?
yeah, okay.
And the last, Timothy, is it possible 1 minute answer?
Right, very short.
Yes,
So
you will do.
So the question I've got is the ultimate goal and the kinds of benefits. For us, the ultimate goal of the MOOCs is to enhance the student learning experience. The benefits we've seen in the university are worldwide reach, benefit to reputation, robustness, because by reaching out in a different way, this means that if, for example, there are visa changes or such where we have another way of contacting our students, a general feed into supporting all learning better. And I guess contrary to the previous speaker, we have seen a real positive excitement in the faculty. They are enjoying using the MOOCs and they boast about their success in it.
Okay, thank you. And why don't you answer for wrapping up this session, Johanness?
The question was about the sustainability and mechanisms both for the suppliers, so the content developers to be sustainable, and then on the demand side, how would the cost be driven? Right now, there are different ways to do that. The first and foremost, all MOOC providers do that. They charge not for the content, but they charge for a certificate at the end. So the content is available for free right now, but the content is being charged. That's one avenue. Other avenues that are under development are the licensing of content. So you develop as an author, you develop something, and just like a textbook, that becomes the standard that's being used in blended classrooms. I showed the example of the UC Berkeley room in China, and so there are licensing fees. And then a very important aspect is corporate engagement. So working with employers to identify gaps that they might have in the employment or in their employees, and then specifically develop content and courses that match those needs, and then you can come to financial arrangements. So those are the most popular avenues right now.
Okay, let me give the questions all but the participants on the presenters and discussants. Do they have this kind of motivated and curious and really excellent audience previous? Yes? No? Yes, definitely, definitely. In my memory, I never have this kind of really intellect audience. I think that's the really say how we have exciting and expect K-MOOC for next year. So it is really good chance to share qualified education for all, and also it's a possible to be used as appropriate technology, especially the Korea is a prominent country with ICT, one of the most advanced countries. So based on the K-MOOC, we can do something globally, share our experience and ideas, especially our lifelong education model internationally. So, are you enough for this session to close? Get something? No? Yes? Okay, thank you so much for your participating and attention for this session. And why don't you clap for all the participants and presenters and discussions? Thank you so much.